Dr. Jordan Peterson, a Canadian professor and clinical psychologist, hosted a 15-part YouTube series of lectures on the psychological significance of biblical stories in 2017. Watching the series, it is painfully obvious he has made several errors in interpretation and/or overlooked completely the original context of the stories he attempts to analyze. Granted, he is not a biblical scholar, though it is clear he has done a lot of homework. Peterson's attempt to layer a current interpretation onto stories from millennia ago is perplexing given that these stories have evolved, in some cases significantly, different meanings over time. What the stories meant when they were created, irrespective of the impossibility of adequately diagnosing the psychological aspects of the author's mindset and motivation and how they have come to be seen over time, are vastly separate topics. Conflating these two separate issues leads to exactly the error in perspective which Peterson assigns these stories in his interpretations. It is these revisionist interpretations that I will challenge over 6 videos dedicated to a specific subject to give them the attention each topic deserves, deconstructing some of Jordan's more extraordinary claims and providing the historical backstory to counter Peterson's viewpoints. Specifically, I will address why the psychological significance he assigns to biblical stories is flawed, to contest his beliefs that 1. The Judeo-Christian ethic is what underpins the value systems of Western civilization, and 2. Atheists and anti-religious thinkers are abandoning this tradition to our collective peril. What I will demonstrate is that what he believes to be true in many cases are his personal views or that of the Christian faithful, views not necessarily held by religious scholars or even the correct interpretations for that matter. What his motivations were for this series only Peterson can say. He steadfastly refuses to be pinned down and boxed in on what his beliefs are. He is always extremely coy about affirming his Christianity, and note how in this clip he still does not answer the question he was asked, but spouts some word salad that has nothing to do with the question he was asked.
But you've slipped away, if I can bring you back to Justin's question, really, because you slithered out of it, I think, in your question was Jesus different from the rest of us by saying, oh, we've all got a spark of divinity. But do you then believe that Jesus was somehow divine in a sense that's other than what I am? What was it, did he do miracles? Was he, all of that stuff that
Quick
makes
answer,
him...
and then we'll finish with a final question.
Quick answer. How about this? Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's. That's a miracle. That's the separation of church and state in one sentence. So there's a miracle for you.
Though in the Adam and Eve lecture, Peterson let his mask slip for a moment when he explicitly states,
like the idea that the fall was, a terrible tragedy, but on the other hand, it was the precondition for the greatest event in history, which was the birth of Christ and the redemption of mankind.
Now, was Peterson saying this in conjunction with the metaphorical deconstruction of the fall narrative from Genesis 3, or was he stating what he himself believes? First of all, the story of Adam and Eve comes from Tablet 9 of the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest surviving written tale from Sumer, and it was incorporated into the Hebrew Bible over 1,500 years later. Considering the fall narrative in its original form, both Sumerian and Hebrew, has absolutely nothing to do with Christianity and the redemption of mankind through Jesus, nor could the plagiarizer of the garden story have foreseen how later Christian traditions would use this story to bolster their dogmatic beliefs. It is unlikely that this is what Peterson is trying to imply. The logical conclusion is that Peterson is making a statement of his own belief, a belief that 1. He maintains is the greatest in history, 2. That Jesus is actually the Messiah, and 3. That Jesus redeemed humanity. It is no longer mere speculation of his bias towards Christianity, but indeed this reveals the foundational basis for the entire series about how the psychological truths of Judeo-Christianity will save humanity from itself. I wonder what Freud would say about Peterson's evasive circumlocutions, what subconscious desire drives him to be a shill for Christianity, and this peculiar need to be covert about it. Peterson makes a series of assertions that the Judeo-Christian ethic is all that stands between Western civilization and nihilistic oblivion at the hands of the increasingly irreligious.
Idea is to see if there's something at the bottom of this amazing civilization that we've managed to construct that I think is in peril for a variety of reasons. And maybe if we understand it a little bit better, we won't be so prone just to throw the damn thing away, which I think would be a big mistake. And to throw it away because of resentment and hatred and bitterness and historical ignorance and jealousy and the desire for destruction and all of that. It's like, I don't want to go there. It's a bad idea to go there, and we need to be grounded better. And so,
irrespective of whether there's a God, what is it that you fear we would lose if people stopped believing that there was a God, or believing there was value in believing?
We'd lose the metaphoric substrate of our ethos, and we'd be lost.
And so I think Nietzsche
an
was uneducated. Right about that. So people would say, "Oh," and this is kind of what we're getting at from a different angle. I would say they would be afraid of what we would lose if we lost religion, and I basically said, "Demonstrate to me any benefit."
Oh, you'd lose art and poetry and drama and narrative and story.
Why? Are there no godless artists and poets?
There are artists and poets who think they're godless.
A fellow psychologist takes him to task over this perspective. Peterson seems to assume that the only alternatives to religious morality are totalitarian atrocities or despondent nihilism. Yet, in this next clip, Peterson actually admits that the stories and metaphors for life contained in the Bible predate the Bible by thousands and thousands of years.
With these old stories, these ancient stories, it seems to me like that process has been occurring for thousands of years. It's like we watched ourselves and we extracted out some stories. We imitated each other and we represented that in drama, and then we distilled the drama and we got a representation of the distillation, and then we did it again. And at the end of that process that took God only knows how long, I think some of these stories, they've traced fairy tales back 10,000 years, some fairy tales, in relatively unchanged form. And it certainly seems to me that the archaeological evidence, for example, suggests that the really old stories that the Bible begins with are at least that old and likely embedded in a prehistory that's far older than that.
It appears contradictory to me anyway, that if the values contained within the Judeo-Christian tradition preceded the tradition, then why should Peterson be worried if people are simply abandoning the vehicle which successfully conveyed the values? The values are the important factor, the ones that emerged from the unconscious, not the transmission mechanism. Yet Peterson continues to insist throughout the series that Judeo-Christian values and ethics underpin Western morality, which he fears the anti-religious are doing away with at exaggerated risk to our social stability, despite admitting in this clip that they predated monotheistic religion. Indeed, he refers to them as fairy tales, not even religious morals. Then in this next clip, Peterson spews the most utter nonsense about atheists believing humans would all immediately become rational thinkers if we abandon religious belief. Peterson then cites two medieval intellectuals as examples of rational thinkers, yet conveniently omits pointing out they were both devout Christians who made irrational arguments about belief in God. He goes on to claim there is no evidence for heightened rationality in our increasingly secular world, which is further ammunition that he is plainly ignoring the facts which contradict his narrative that abandoning religion is a threat to society.
The people who are adamant anti-religious thinkers seem to believe that if we abandoned our immersement in the underlying dream, that we'd all instantly become rationalists like Descartes or Bacon, or intelligent, clear-thinking, rational, scientific people. And I don't believe that for a moment, because I don't think there's any evidence for it. I think we would become so irrational so rapidly that the weirdest mysteries of Catholicism would seem positively rational by contrast, and I think that's already happening.
Another Canadian psychologist, Steven Pinker, points out how Peterson is wrong on this claim in Enlightenment Now, writing, "If the positive contributions of religious institutions come from their role as humanistic associations in civil society, then we would expect those benefits not to be tied to theistic belief, and that is indeed the case." Pinker, as the subtitle of the book alludes, made the case for reason, science, humanism, and progress, that society is not in any danger, contrary to Peterson's dire warnings, from increasing secularization. A viable moral philosophy for a cosmopolitan world cannot be constructed from layers of intricate argumentation or rest on deep metaphysical or religious convictions. History confirms that when diverse cultures have to find common ground, they converge toward humanism. Peterson also overlooked the very contribution Enlightenment thinking had on modern moral standards, hell-bent as he was to demonize the secular shift away from religion that was spawned by these ideals in his attempt to glorify the Judeo-Christian ethic as the sole provider of Western values. As Pinker continued, today, of course, enlightened believers cherry-pick the human injunctions while allegorizing, spin-doctoring, or ignoring the vicious ones, and that's just the point. They read the Bible through the lens of Enlightenment humanism. Tufts University philosophy professor Dan Dennett echoed the same sentiments. Secularists don't have to build anything. We can choose moral philosophies from what's already well tested. If religious people think that their faith excuses them from evaluating the duties and taboos handed down to them, they are morally obtuse. We secularists have no need for love of any imaginary being, since there is a bounty of real things in the world to love, and to motivate us: peace, justice, freedom, learning, music, art, science, nature, love, and health, for instance. Dennett further expounded on secular morality, stating, "The idea that you can't be moral without religion is just a complete falsehood." British philosopher A.C. Grayling also discussed the benefits of humanism, writing, "Humanism is a general outlook based on two allied premises, which allow considerable latitude to what follows from them. The premises are, first, that there are no supernatural entities or agencies in the universe, and second, that our individual and social ethics must be drawn from and responsive to facts about the nature and circumstances of human beings." As the early needs for tribal cohesion led to greater demands for social community, which gave rise to religious and political identities, group values have emerged, changed, and advanced through time. As Deuteronomy codified civil rights and Christianity built on them, so too will universal human ideals leave behind the unhelpful dogmas and take what Matt Dillahunty points out are true and good and useful, and build on and expand from the corpse of outdated religious beliefs. If you like my content, please like and subscribe to get notified of new videos. Please also consider supporting my work by becoming a Patreon sponsor. You can also find me on the following platforms: